The Peppa Pig movie, Cinema Party, was a huge hit among fans of the Pink Piggy, but since the trailer was released, millions have wondered, how can Mr. Bull and Mrs. Cow get married if they already have a daughter? And if this is true, why wasn't the little cow at her own parents' wedding? These are some of the biggest mysteries of this show that need to be solved. That's why we analyzed and will explain every detail about this right now.
Oh, I cannot decide.
You don't have to.
The couple. We know Mr. Bull is one of the most hard-working characters in the Peppa series. Of course, he comes second to Mrs. Rabbit, who is unbeatable. Not much is known about Mr. Bull's personal life, except that he's always working. Many people even thought Mr. Bull had a crush on Madame Gazelle, but she wasn't interested.
Goodbye.
People thought she might be upset about the wedding. The movie shows something interesting about this. But now let's talk about the couple, the main attraction of Peppa Pig's Cinema Party movie. Even though they seem like a natural pair, we never see them together in the show, which made their wedding announcement a big surprise. Logically, Mr. Bull and Mrs. Cow are a natural couple, but if they got married, it means they didn't have a formal relationship before. However, in the hospital episode, we see a photo of her beloved on the bovine nurse's break room wall. Additionally, in another episode, Mrs. Cow seems to meet Mr. Bull in a ceramic shop. Notice he's already inside, likely waiting for her. Maybe they were shopping for their wedding items in advance. This might explain why they told everyone about the wedding just a day before. Sneaky. But looking at the image, we see Mrs. Cow is not alone. She's with a mini version of herself. So the question is, who is the little cow? This little character beside Mrs. Cow is one of Peppa's series' big mysteries. We never see her at Madame Gazelle's school, so we don't even know her name. However, it's undeniable that she exists and appeared in some episodes. She even appears with Mr. Bull in the supermarket episode. We see them together with an empty shopping cart, indicating they shopped together, loaded the car, and returned the cart. This activity is usually done by people who are close, suggesting a bond between the little cow and Mr. Bull. But what is it? We all know Peppa Pig's character design isn't its strong suit, so characters looking alike doesn't necessarily mean they're related, just like Chloe, Peppa's cousin, who looks almost identical to her except for a yellow dress and slightly taller stature. Honestly, if Chloe went to the Pig family's house and Peppa went to Chloe's, even their parents might not tell the difference. So, the little cow might or might not be Mrs. Cow's daughter. Given this, we have 3 options to explore, and we'll discuss the first one right now. But first, since we're talking about one of the most surprising cartoon couples today, comment below with #cow or #bull to highlight this wedding even more.
Who wants a piece of this beautiful wedding cake?
The couple's daughter. Some couples, even without a formal wedding ceremony, live together and have kids. Though unlikely, this could be the case with Mrs. Cow and Mr. Bull in Peppa Pig. This would explain the existence of the little cow, making her their daughter. This also explains why Mr. Bull is at school to pick up kids, despite many thinking he has no children. It also justifies his participation in the dad's football team, joining barbecues that end in fires because he's a dad too. But there's another possibility. Mrs. Cow's daughter. Another possibility is that the little cow is only Mrs. Cow's daughter, not Mr. Bull's. This fits well with them only getting married now, 20 years after the show's release, but about 1.5 years in Peppa Pig's timeline. The little cow being just Mrs. Cow's daughter explains why she and Mr. Bull went to the supermarket together to strengthen their bond, as they both love the same person. For this theory to be true, either Mrs. Cow is divorced or widowed and lost her husband for some undisclosed reason, but this doesn't explain why the character isn't always in the show or at the same school as Peppa, since all local kids seem to study together. The little cow seems about the same size as the Pink Piggy, indicating similar or close ages. This leads us to the third possibility.
Owing to the current mud situation, I've got a better idea.
Relative of Mrs. Cow. The last possibility, which we sincerely believe to be the most likely, would be the fact that the little character, who is practically a small, hornless version of Mrs. Cow, would simply be a relative of the character. For this reason, her appearances in the Peppa series would only happen from time to time. This would also explain why the character, despite being the same age as the little pig, is not in the same school as her. Similarly, this would unravel any mystery and suspicion about the relationship between Mrs. Cow and Mr. Bull, proving that they were indeed just dating all this time, and that they still don't have their own children, something that may happen in the future, of course. Furthermore, anyone who watched the movie will notice that several children attended the wedding of the bovine couple, but the cow herself is not there. And if you think about it, if she were the couple's daughter, even if they weren't officially married yet, she would be a bridesmaid and not Peppa Pig. Besides, even if she were only Mrs. Cow's daughter and didn't live with her, but rather with her father, she would probably be at her mother's wedding, as that would surely be something very important. In any case, we really believe that the little cow must be with her family, and they probably live far away from Peppa's town, which made it impossible for them to attend the couple's wedding since everything was done in a short period of time. Now, let's talk about some really cool details about this wedding, but first, subscribe to the channel here if you haven't already. You'll definitely enjoy it.
It is the most beautiful cake I have ever seen.
The wedding. This was probably the fastest organized ceremony that must have ever happened in the history of cartoons. In fact, the 2024 Peppa Pig movie served as a celebration of the show's 20 years of existence. And despite the feature film comprising 10 episodes and still featuring new songs and moments of interaction with the audience, the main focus was definitely Mr. Bull and Mrs. Cow's wedding. So much so that 3 out of the 10 episodes were devoted to telling their story. Even if you didn't watch the movie, it was clear that the couple made a last-minute decision and they went to the Pig family's house to share the good news and invite Peppa to be a bridesmaid. Of course, just like most things in the show, this happened at 10 in the morning. Regarding the ceremony, we have some cool things to talk about it. First of all, the ceremony was actually conducted by none other than Madame Gazelle herself. Why did this happen? Probably because it was last minute. There was no priest or pastor available to conduct the vows. Also, Peppa's teacher must be the oldest person around, so she was the most suitable to conduct the ceremony. But I have to confess, I was a bit disappointed because I thought this would be another one of Mrs. Rabbit's jobs, but I guess that would be too much. This also dispels any notion that Mr. Bull and Madame Gazelle might have any affection for each other. But that certainly doesn't change the fact that Peppa's teacher is still a vampire who came from Transylvania and raises bats on her own balcony. But still, we have to admit that the rock gazelles really rock when it comes to making quality music. And they definitely made the wedding party even livelier, thus consummating the surprise marriage of the Peppa Pig couple. Additionally, another thing that caught a lot of attention was Mr. Fox's positive participation in helping to set up the wedding party. If you haven't seen the movie yet, you'll notice in the trailer that the character is seen holding a ladder and walking. Contrary to what many people thought, the character wasn't stealing the ladder or anything like that. He was actually just helping, as far as it seems. I mean, to be honest, I don't really know if he put the ladder in the right place, or if he accidentally, so to speak, just placed it inside his utility-filled van. In any case, the entire Fox family was at the party and witnessed the union of the lovely bovine couple who held the eternal love ceremony that afternoon. Another thing that stands out is that even though everyone was well dressed for the wedding, at the end, all the guests were jumping in mud puddles with their boots on. There are things that really only happen in Peppa Pig. But undoubtedly, as I'm a huge fan of cheese, I loved Mrs. Cow's dress, even though it was made that way by accident. We're leaving it up to you now to choose which of our next videos you want to watch with us. Just pick one of the 2 that's popping up. Thanks, and until next time.